The sky ruptured without warning. Not with fire, not with sound, but with color. A deep, wet, crimson shimmer spread across the upper atmosphere above a remote mountain region, like the planet itself had been cut and was bleeding into space. For 3 seconds, every satellite watching that hemisphere froze. Then the feeds went black. Inside a weather station miles below, the lights flickered once. A technician looked up from his console, confused, just as every screen flatlined at the same time. No signal, no telemetry, no error codes. The world didn't end loudly. It went silent. High above, something burned through the atmosphere at an impossible angle, shedding heat but no flame. It didn't tumble like debris. It corrected, adjusted, chose where to fall. The impact never made the news. By the time shockwaves rolled across the mountains, the region was already being scrubbed from public networks. Power grids failed, fiber lines went dead, a clean digital amputation. Officially, it was a meteor strike. Unofficially, no one could explain why the ground beneath the impact zone was still warm. Deep underground, past rock and concrete and forgotten Cold War infrastructure, an ancient bunker trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling in slow drifting sheets. Old lights buzzed back to life one by one, casting sickly yellow halos across steel corridors that hadn't been walked in decades. Something moved in the dark. Not the thing that fell from the sky, but something that had been here long before, encased in silence, waiting. Above ground, snow began to fall. Thick, quiet, heavy flakes that smothered sound and erased tracks almost as fast as they were made. Military convoys rolled in under blackout conditions. Headlights dimmed, radios useless. Soldiers moved with the uneasy efficiency of people sent somewhere they weren't supposed to exist. Then the first scream came through a hardline phone. It cut off mid-breath. Hours later, a different presence arrived. No impact, no shockwave, just a subtle distortion in the air, like heat rising from asphalt, except the temperature dropped instead. Trees bowed as something massive passed through them without breaking a single branch. Snow crunched under invisible weight. Thermal optics flickered. A predator stood at the edge of the forest, cloaked, watching the glowing wound in the earth from a distance. Its mask cycled through vision modes, cataloging radiation, heat signatures, movement. The reading it lingered on wasn't human. It was alive, buried, growing. The hunter tilted its head, studying the terrain like a chessboard. This world was loud with prey, cities, weapons, chaos, but this was something else. A rival. Beneath the mountains, steel doors sealed for decades were finally forced open from the inside, not by explosives, by pressure, by strength. A facehugger skidded into the light, pale and wet, tasting the air with twitching limbs. It paused, sensing something unfamiliar, snow, cold, altitude. Then it moved, vanishing into the shadows of human architecture never meant to contain it. The bunker's cameras activated one by one as emergency power kicked in. Grainy footage showed empty corridor, then motion. Fast. Too fast. The feed glitched as something slammed into the ceiling and disappeared. In the command center, a lone officer stared at the monitors, breath fogging in the cold air. He reached for the radio, hands shaking. "Command," he said. "We've got—" The lights went out. When they came back on, the room was empty. No blood, no struggle. Just claw marks carved into reinforced steel walls, raked inward, as if something had been dragged screaming into the vents. Outside, the predator knelt, placing a hand against the snow. Vibrations traveled up its arm. Movement below, multiple organisms, rapid expansion. The hunter's mandibles flexed slowly. This was not a cleansing mission. This was not observation. This was a hunt worth remembering. Far above the planet, long-range sensors on the Predator ship registered a new signal, one not sent by them. A biological beacon pulsing out into the void, ancient and hungry. On Earth, the snow kept falling, burying roads, bodies, and evidence alike. To the rest of the world, nothing had happened. But beneath the ice and concrete, something had been born again. And something else had chosen to face it. Inside the bunker, the last camera flickered back on for a single second, just long enough to show a xenomorph silhouette crawling across the ceiling, then pausing, its elongated head tilting, as if it sensed it wasn't alone. The feed cut to black, and for the first time in its long, violent history, Earth became hunting ground. The disappearance happened in under 8 seconds. A subway maintenance camera showed a worker stepping off the platform, flashlight bobbing as he moved toward a service tunnel. The next frame caught his light swinging wildly. The frame after that showed nothing at all, no body, no blood, just the flashlight rolling across the concrete on its own before the feed collapsed into static. By the time the footage reached command, the tunnel was already sealed. Above ground, the quarantine tightened. Concrete barriers rose overnight. Military checkpoints swallowed roads that had existed for decades. Official statements spoke of gas leaks, structural instability, terrorist threats, anything except the truth. But beneath the city, something was moving through veins humans had forgotten they built. Storm drains, utility shafts, subway lines abandoned after floods and budget cuts. The city's underbelly was alive. A forensic response unit descended through a service hatch near the outer edge of the exclusion zone. Their lights cut narrow cones through the darkness, beams trembling with every step. Condensation clung to the walls like sweat. The air smelled wrong, sharp, metallic, faintly sweet. Lieutenant Harris led the team, jaw tight, rifle held too close to his chest. He'd seen combat. He'd seen bodies. But nothing prepared him for the silence down here. No rats, no dripping water, no echoes. The first sign wasn't visual. It was texture. Dr. Elena Park crouched near the tunnel wall, gloved fingers brushing against a black glossy smear stretched across concrete. It looked organic, wet but not fresh. "This isn't oil," she said quietly, "and it's not mold." She scraped a sample into a vial. The substance reacted instantly, hissing as it ate through the plastic lining. Harris swore under his breath. "That acid?" Park didn't answer right away. Her eyes traced the wall upward. That's when they saw the cocoon. A human silhouette fused to the tunnel ceiling, limbs stretched in unnatural angles, skin pale and translucent beneath layers of resin-like secretion. The face was frozen in a scream that never finished. Park staggered back. "Oh my God!" Before anyone could speak, a wet, tearing sound echoed from deeper in the tunnel. Movement, fast, low, deliberate. The soldiers raised their weapons, lights shaking now. Something darted across the beam and vanished into a side shaft. Too fast to track, too smooth. Then they found the body. What was left of it? No wounds consistent with a struggle. No defensive injuries. Just a massive cavity in the chest. Ribs peeled outward like a flower forced open. Whatever had killed him hadn't eaten a single bite. Park swallowed hard. "This thing isn't predatory in the way we understand." Harris looked at her. "Then what is it?" She stared at the corpse. "A delivery system." They pulled out immediately. By dawn, similar reports stacked up across the quarantine perimeter. Sewer crews vanished. Transit workers failed to surface. A homeless encampment beneath an overpass went silent overnight, tents untouched, belongings still neatly arranged, as if everyone had simply stood up and walked away. Cameras caught nothing. Sensors detected brief spikes of movement, then nothing at all. The enemy wasn't random. It was systematic. In a temporary command post above ground, analysts pinned images across digital boards, acid scoring, resin deposits, anatomical patterns eerily consistent across sites. The conclusion settled in the room like a weight. This species isn't killing indiscriminately, an intelligence officer said. It's selecting hosts. That was when the call came in. A man had surfaced near the edge of the exclusion zone, alone, covered in grime and chemical burns. He'd wandered out of a storm drain and collapsed in the snow, screaming until his voice gave out. They brought him in, wrapped in thermal blankets, eyes darting wildly, as if the walls might move. He flinched at every shadow, every hum of electricity. Park knelt in front of him, keeping her voice calm. You're safe. Whatever you saw, it's not here. The man laughed, short and broken. You don't get it. She hesitated. What do you mean? He leaned closer, lowering his voice. The thing in the tunnels. It wasn't the worst part. Harris stiffened. Explain. The survivor's eyes filled with tears. It hunted us, took people, but something else followed it. Silence swallowed the room. Followed how? Park asked. The man swallowed. Didn't rush. Didn't attack, just watched. Like we were already dead and it was deciding which one to take. He looked up at the ceiling, breath shaking. It wasn't afraid of the monster. Outside, snow fell thicker, muffling the city. Somewhere beneath the concrete, something shifted its position, responding to movement it couldn't see but could feel. And from the shadows beyond human vision, another presence observed the spreading hive with quiet interest. The hunt had entered its second phase. The first body was found hanging upside down from a freeway overpass. Not torn, not burned, just placed. A soldier from the outer quarantine patrol, throat caved in with a single, impossible blow. His rifle lay meters away, untouched. No signs of a struggle, no acid, no resin. Whatever killed him hadn't been interested in incubation. Thermal drones replayed the moment of death, frame by frame. A heat bloom flared behind the soldier, then vanished. No footsteps, no muzzle flash. Just a brief distortion in the air, like something stepped out of reality for half a second and stepped back in. Command didn't call it an enemy yet. They called it an anomaly. Rain hammered the city that night, washing ash and snow into the gutters, turning streets into mirrors of broken light. Inside a mobile operations center, analysts leaned closer to their screens as thermal feeds flickered with impossible patterns, cold silhouettes moving against warmer backgrounds, shapes that shouldn't have existed. They're circling, one technician muttered, not attacking. On a rooftop miles away, something knelt in the rain. The predator's cloak rippled as droplets slid through its outline. Its mask clicked softly, cycling through vision modes, infrared, electromagnetic, ultraviolet, layering the city into data and threat vectors. Below, human patrols moved in tight formations, weapons up, fear bleeding through their posture. Deeper still, beneath concrete and steel, xenomorphs flowed through tunnels like living shadows. The hunter watched both. It did not intervene when a xenomorph dragged a soldier screaming into a subway shaft. It did not assist when humans flooded a tunnel with fire and motion sensors. It recorded, measured, learned. Every species hunted differently. The predator's risk computer pulsed as it logged weapon yields, reaction times, kill efficiency. Human firearms proved loud, inaccurate under stress, effective only in numbers. The xenomorphs were elegant, silent, coordinated, adaptive, dangerous, worthy. A sudden movement caught the predator's attention. A lone xenomorph scout emerged into a half-collapsed parking structure, its black carapace gleaming under flickering emergency lights. It moved cautiously, tail coiled, sensing unfamiliar vibrations above. The predator shifted, uncloaking just enough to anchor itself. A click, a hum. The plasma caster locked on, but the hunter did not fire. Instead, it followed. From a distance, the predator tracked the creature's path, how it tested surfaces before committing weight, how it avoided open spaces, how it communicated through subtle body language with unseen kin. The xenomorph wasn't wandering. It was mapping. Elsewhere in the quarantine, human forces began to notice the pattern. 3 xenomorphs found dead in a storm tunnel. No acid burns on the walls. No human bullets embedded in flesh. Their skulls were shattered inward, surgical and precise. Dr. Park stared at the remains, brow furrowed. This wasn't us. Harris crossed his arms. Then what was it? She pointed to the wounds. Whatever did this wanted to kill, not the body. The realization hit Command hard and fast. This wasn't a two-sided conflict. Someone, something else was operating inside the zone. Something with technology beyond human capability and tactics beyond xenomorph instinct. They weren't fighting the monsters, they were being evaluated. Night fell again, and with it came the sound. A low, rhythmic clicking, echoing through a ruined industrial district. Motion sensors went dead one by one. Soldiers froze in place, fingers tight on triggers, eyes scanning empty air. Then a scream. The human patrol scattered as something invisible tore through them with brutal efficiency. One soldier was lifted off his feet and slammed into a wall hard enough to crack concrete. Another fired blindly into the rain before his weapon was sliced cleanly in half. Thermal cameras caught the predator mid-strike for less than a second, a towering shape, dreadlocks swinging, eyes burning white-hot through the storm. Then it was gone, not retreating, relocating. The predator returned to higher ground as emergency sirens wailed uselessly below. From here it could see the faint heat signature of a growing hive beneath an abandoned hospital complex. Hundreds of xenomorphs clustered around a central node, resin spreading outward like a living tumor. The hunter extended a blade and carved a symbol into a steel girder, deep, deliberate, ceremonial. A mark of claim. The wrist computer pulsed again, locking the hive's coordinates. This world was no longer a battleground. It was a proving ground. Far below, the hive stirred. The xenomorph queen shifted in her chamber, sensing a presence that did not belong to prey or rival species she understood. And for the first time since they arrived, both monsters became aware of each other. Earth had been chosen. The hunt had begun. The drone feed came online mid-fall. Static cleared just enough to reveal a collapsing smokestack rushing past the lens, sparks and ash spiraling upward as the drone stabilized itself above an abandoned industrial sector. Rusted refineries stretched for miles, skeletal towers clawing at low clouds. Wind howled through broken pipes, carrying the stink of oil, metal, and something older. Movement lit up the thermal overlay. Multiple contacts, fast, non-human. The xenomorph pack emerged first. They flowed across steel catwalks and concrete like spilled ink. 6 of them, bodies low and fluid, claws clinking softly against metal. Their elongated heads tilted in unison, sensing vibrations that didn't belong to prey. This wasn't human fear. This was something disciplined, intentional. Then the air shimmered. A predator decloaked mid-stride, towering and broad-shouldered, plasma caster whining as it charged. Two more followed, spreading out with practiced spacing, weapons already tracking targets. No hesitation, no warning. The first plasma bolt tore through the darkness, vaporizing a xenomorph's chest in a bloom of blue-white light. Acid sprayed across a fuel tank, eating deep, screaming metal. The tank ruptured seconds later, fireball rolling outward and throwing shadows across the battlefield. The xenomorphs answered instantly. They leapt, not wildly, but with lethal precision. One slammed into a predator's chest, inner jaws snapping inches from its throat before twin wrist blades punched up through the creature's skull. The predator roared, shoving the corpse aside as acid hissed against its armor. Another xenomorph came from above. The drone camera caught it in a blur, dropping from a gantry and wrapping its tail around a predator's arm. The hunter fired point-blank, plasma scorching the creature's side, but not enough. Acid cascaded over the predator's shoulder, armor smoking, flesh beneath sizzling. The predator ripped free with brute force, tossing the xenomorph into a wall hard enough to crater concrete. No sound carried clearly over the chaos, just flashes, impacts, heat signatures slamming together faster than the drone could track. A predator net whined through the air, snapping shut around a xenomorph mid-leap. The creature shrieked as the net tightened, slicing through limbs with mechanical precision. It thrashed violently, acid spraying in wild arcs that burned holes through the floor. Then the pack adapted. Two xenomorphs charged directly at the same predator, one drawing fire, the other slipping beneath the plasma stream, claws finding gaps in armor. The hunter staggered, mandibles flaring in pain, wrist blades carving desperately as acid splashed across its chest. Another predator stepped in, calm, deliberate, and drove a spear clean through a xenomorph's torso, pinning it to a support beam. The creature writhed, tail lashing, until a single, decisive twist ended it. For a moment, just a breath, the battlefield paused. Smoke rolled between the ruins, fire crackled, acid ate steadily through steel. Both sides reassessed. The predators clicked to one another, low and rapid, shifting formation. One activated a shoulder-mounted launcher, micro-missiles locking onto heat signatures simultaneously. The xenomorphs didn't retreat. They screamed. The Queen's call echoed through the ruins, not audible but felt, a pressure that made concrete vibrate. The remaining xenomorphs surged forward with renewed fury, abandoning caution entirely. Missiles detonated, shredding bodies and infrastructure alike. A tower collapsed, crashing down in a cascade of sparks and debris that swallowed half the battlefield. The drone's feed glitched violently, struggling to maintain altitude. Through the dust, silhouettes collided. Claws against blades, teeth against armor, acid against plasma. One predator was dragged down under sheer weight, three xenomorphs piling atop it, tearing, piercing, overwhelming. The hunter fought savagely, wrist bomb charging as a last resort. Then the feed cut. Black. When the signal returned, it wasn't from the drone. It was a body cam. Human recovery teams moved cautiously through the ruins hours later, floodlights slicing through smoke and drifting ash. No sign of life, no movement on thermal. Just bodies. Xenomorph remains littered the ground, charred, shattered, dissolved. Predator blood stained the concrete, thick and luminous, still steaming in the cold airs. They found the corpse near the center of the destruction. A predator warrior, massive even in death, armor scarred and half-melted. One arm torn away, chest cavity collapsed inward. Its mask lay meters away, cracked but intact. But its head was gone, cleanly removed. No explosion damage, no acid burns. Dr. Park stared at the body, heart pounding. This one didn't lose. Harris looked around the devastated sector and at the signs of battle no human force could have survived. Then where's the winner? No one answered. Somewhere beneath the city, resin spread thicker along the walls of a growing hive, and far above, predator sensors logged the loss and the escalation. The war was no longer theoretical. Earth had witnessed its first open clash between gods of the hunt, and it would not be the last. The evacuation corridor collapsed at 3:17. A line of buses crawled through the rain, headlights diffused by plastic tarps and fear. Families pressed together inside, faces pale, phones dead, trusting the soldiers who waved them forward with tight, shaking hands. The route had been cleared twice, swept, scanned, declared safe. The first xenomorph erupted from beneath the asphalt. The road split open like a wound, concrete buckling as black limbs punched through from below. The creature vaulted onto the lead bus, claws shredding metal, tail spearing through glass and flesh in the same fluid motion. Screams filled the air as acid hissed and ate through the hood, the engine dying in a choking cloud of steam. Soldiers opened fire immediately and muzzle flashes strobed against the rain, bullets sparking off carapace, slowing but not stopping it. A second xenomorph burst from a storm drain, then a third, this one already inside the convoy, having ridden the undercarriage for miles. The evacuation route became a feeding ground. High above, satellites lost the feed as the area was scrubbed clean from public record. Officially, the corridor failed due to structural collapse. Unofficially, Command watched the thermal signatures scatter outward like spilled ants. They weren't breaching containment. They were using it. Inside a fortified operations center, maps updated in real time. Red markers spreading along highways, rail lines, drainage networks. Every route humans used to flee became a path for the hive to expand. Every safe zone became a delivery point. Dr. Park slammed a hand on the table. They're not following us by accident, they're learning our behavior. A general stared at the map, jaw clenched. We're sealing the cities, full lockdown. Park shook her head. You can't seal a species that thinks in 3 dimensions. Too late. Below the city, xenomorphs navigated service tunnels that hadn't appeared on blueprints in decades. They moved through abandoned fiber conduits, flooded sublevels, forgotten subway lines, spaces humans had surrendered long ago. Facehuggers slipped into shelters through ventilation shafts barely wider than a hand. Containment failed quietly, everywhere at once. And someone else noticed. Predator scouts stalked the chaos from the margins, their presence marked only by absence. Areas where xenomorph numbers thinned unnaturally, where bodies were found dismantled with ritual precision. The hunters adapted as quickly as their prey, abandoning isolated kills in favor of baited ambushes. Trophies became harder to claim. The xenomorphs stopped charging blindly. They feinted, lured, sacrificed drones to expose firing patterns. More than one predator was caught mid-strike by coordinated counterattacks, acid spraying deliberately, targeting joints and cloaking emitters. One hunter barely escaped, armor half melted, mandibles flared in something close to anger. On a rain-soaked rooftop overlooking the sprawl, a predator elder observed the city through layered vision modes. Heat signatures pulsed everywhere, millions of humans packed into towers and shelters, fear lighting them up like beacons. Beneath them, the hive spread, its geometry expanding with ruthless efficiency. This hunt was becoming inefficient. The elder clicked, sharp and final. Orders rippled through the clan network. Aggression escalated. That night, a predator hunting party struck a refugee transit hub at the city's edge, not to harvest humans, but to flush prey. Plasma fire carved through concrete supports, collapsing sections of the structure and driving xenomorphs into the open. The battle that followed was brief and catastrophic, visible for miles as blue-white light tore through rain and darkness. Humans caught between them died without ever seeing what killed them. Command finally understood the truth they'd been avoiding. This wasn't an invasion to be repelled. It was a contest being fought on their planet. As dawn broke, emergency broadcasts failed one by one. Power grids flickered under unexplained surges. Air traffic froze as something interfered with radar across an entire metropolitan region. People looked up. At first, it was just a distortion in the clouds, a ripple like heat haze stretched across the sky. Then the ripple widened, resolving into edges, angles, impossible geometry bending light around it. Gasps echoed through streets and shelters. A shadow fell that didn't belong to any building. With a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the bone and steel alike, a predator ship decloaked above the city. Massive, unapologetic, its hull scarred and ancient, weapons ports glowing faintly, as systems came fully online. For the first time, there was no secrecy, no observation, no restraint. Dr. Park watched from a shattered window miles away, her reflection pale against the rising shape in the sky. They're not hiding anymore. Harris tightened his grip on his rifle, knowing how useless it was. What does that mean? Above them, the ship adjusted its position, casting its shadow over millions of lives. It meant the hunt had escalated beyond the ground. And Earth, burning, divided and exposed, had just been claimed as contested territory. The weapon fired once and rewrote the room. A focused lance of blue-white energy punched through the reinforced test wall, through 3 meters of concrete, and vanished into the mountain beyond. The recoil slammed the firing rig backward, alarms shrieking as power conduits overloaded and burst into flame. For half a second, gravity felt wrong. Then the lights died. Silence followed, thick and stunned. Dr. Park lowered her hands from her ears, staring at the smoking breach. The air still hummed, ionized and sharp, like a thunderstorm trapped indoors. That, she said quietly, was never meant to be held by human hands. Technicians scrambled to contain secondary fires. One of them lay motionless near the console, eyes open, skin blistered where the energy backwash had kissed him. Harris moved past the medics, jaw clenched, looking at the weapon mounted on its rail, sleek, alien, terrifyingly elegant. Predator tech, salvaged from the battlefield, cut open, studied, rebuilt with human desperation. They'd called it a breakthrough. The fragments had come from the corpse found in the industrial sector, armor plates fused to bone, a plasma caster cracked but intact. The moment Command approved the black site transfer, the race began. Physicists argued, engineers improvised. Soldiers stood guard as if the thing might wake up. It hadn't needed to. They learned fast. Too fast. The first hybrid weapons were unstable, their power cells whining like living things. Some melted after a single discharge, others detonated, vaporizing their operators. But the successful ones, those changed everything. For the first time, Xenomorph carapace failed cleanly under human fire. Acid sprayed, yes, but the kills were decisive. Hope spread like a fever. So did attention. High above the planet, ancient sensors shifted focus. On the Predator ship, the Elder watched the telemetry scroll across its mask. Energy signatures that mirrored their own, distorted and crude, but unmistakable. The hunt paused, just long enough for judgment. Humans had crossed a line. Back on Earth, the first field deployment came at dusk. A strike team descended into a collapsed transit hub, hybrid rifles humming softly in their grips. Sweat beaded under their helmets as motion trackers pulsed. When the xenomorphs came, fast, screaming, fearless, the weapons answered. 3 shots, 3 kills. Carapace ruptured, bodies fell. The soldiers stared, disbelief cracking into laughter. One of them raised a fist. "We can fight back." The ceiling exploded. A predator dropped into the middle of the formation, cloak disengaging mid-fall. Wrist blades flashed. One soldier went down before he could scream. Another fired reflexively, the plasma bolt tearing across the predator's shoulder, burning deep. The hunter roared. It didn't retreat. It advanced. The fight lasted seconds. When it ended, the predator stood alone among bodies, smoke rising from its wound. Mandibles flared in fury, not pain. It knelt beside a fallen rifle, lifting it with careful contempt. Its wrist computer chirped, analyzing the weapon's core. Confirmation. The hunter crushed the rifle underfoot and activated its transmitter. Across the globe, systems spiked. Military satellites locked up. Civilian screens flickered to static. Emergency broadcasts cut mid-sentence. Then a signal forced its way through, raw, untranslated, powerful enough to override protocols never meant to bend. The image stabilized. A predator elder filled the screen, armor etched with symbols older than human history. Its mask retracted slowly, revealing mandibles scarred by centuries of battle. It stared directly into the lens, into command centers and living rooms alike, into a world that had just announced itself. The voice that followed was distorted, but unmistakably intentional. "You take what is not yours." Silence swallowed the planet. "You forge claws from stolen bone," the elder continued. "You strike prey, meant for the hunt." The image shifted. Xenomorph bodies, human corpses, predator dead, skull missing. This world is no longer unseen. In the operations center, Park felt her stomach drop. Harris stared at the screen, knuckles white. The elder leaned closer. "You wish to stand among hunters," it said. "Then stand." The transmission cut. For a moment, nothing moved. Then alarms began to sound, not local, but global. New heat signatures bloomed in the upper atmosphere. Cloaked shapes slid into low orbit, their outlines barely visible against the stars. Harris broke the silence. "They're calling us out." Park looked at the prototype rifle still mounted in the test chamber, its core pulsing softly, impatient. "And if we don't answer..." Above them, something massive shifted position, blotting out the moon. Command gave the order. Hybrid weapons were authorized for mass deployment. As factories were repurposed and soldiers armed themselves with technology stolen from gods of the hunt, Earth sent its reply, not with words but with fire. The war had changed, and now humanity was officially prey or challenger. The city cracked open from the inside. Concrete bulged, then split as resin-black growth forced its way up through the basements and sub-levels. Streets sagged, buildings leaned. In the ruins of what had once been a financial district, the first queen emerged, her massive crown scraping steel beams as she hauled herself into a cathedral of bone and rebar. Drones swarmed around her, efficient and silent, sealing entrances with living walls. Eggs were laid in disciplined rows. The city was no longer occupied. It was converted. Across the river, another hive ignited to life beneath a collapsed stadium. Then another beneath a hospital complex. The queens worked in parallel, not competing, not hesitating, each node expanding with ruthless logic. Subways became arteries, skyscraper basements became nurseries. The air grew thick with pheromones that made the back of human throats burn and eyes water. Evacuation orders failed before they finished transmitting. Predator ships pierced the clouds at dawn. They descended in numbers humanity had never recorded, sleek, brutal silhouettes, dropping hunters into hot zones with surgical precision. Cloaks shimmered and vanished as clans fanned out, their clicks echoing through smoke-filled streets. This was no longer reconnaissance. This was a purge. The first clash tore through a residential block. A predator war party hit a hive entrance carved through an apartment tower, plasma fire punching holes through floors and igniting gas lines. Xenomorphs poured out in response, dozens at once, bodies glistening as they leapt through flame without hesitation. Wrist blades met claws, nets sliced through limbs, acid burned through armor and concrete alike, collapsing stairwells and sending both species tumbling into darkness. Humans were ants between giants. A predator leapt from a rooftop, spear driving through a drone midair, only to be dragged down by a coordinated pylon that dissolved the street beneath them. The blast threw cars like toys, windows shattered for blocks. Somewhere inside the chaos, a queen screamed, not in pain, but command. The city answered. Drones surged from side streets and sewer grates, flooding kill zones faster than predators could clear them. The hunters adapted, moving higher, striking from above, herding prey into choke points before unleashing heavier weapons. Shoulder cannons roared, smart discs carved glowing arcs through the smoke, returning slick with black ichor. Entire districts vanished under the fighting. From a shattered overpass, Harris watched the skyline burn, hybrid rifle shaking in his hands. "This is a war," he breathed. Park stood beside him, eyes hollow, tracking the movement of hives on her tablet as icons multiplied. "It's worse," she said. "It's organized." A predator clan leader landed nearby, uncloaking with a heavy thud. Its armor was scorched, one mandible cracked, but its posture was unbowed and it didn't acknowledge the humans, only looked toward the largest hive, eyes glowing as its wrist computer pulsed. Then it signaled. From above, a ship fired a focused bombardment. The ground shook as plasma rained down, collapsing the hive's outer chambers. For a moment, it looked like victory. Drones burned, eggs ruptured. The queen did not die. She withdrew deeper, sacrificing layers without hesitation, rerouting her brood through tunnels humans didn't know existed. Minutes later, a counter-surge erupted behind predator lines, drones bursting up through asphalt and flooding the rear with merciless efficiency. The predators faltered, just for a second. It was enough. A hunter was pinned, tail wrapped around its neck, inner jaws snapping inches from its face. Another predator cleaved the drone in half, but acid flooded the pinned hunter's mask. The scream that followed cut through the din, raw, furious, brief. The clan leader roared and charged, blades flashing, dragging the fight back into balance. But the cost was visible now. Hunters fell, drones fell faster. The war spread outward, block by block, hive by hive. Predator clans coordinated strikes across cities, leveling neighborhoods to deny the queen's resources. The queens responded by accelerating reproduction, turning shelters and tunnels into factories. Smoke blotted out the sun. Ash fell like snow. Civilization fractured under the weight of it. And then something changed. In the depths of a hive beneath the old civic center, a queen paused, her crest tilted, sensing a shift among her brood. One drone did not move with the others. It watched, calculated. Its movements were slower, deliberate. When a predator breach charge detonated nearby, it didn't rush the opening. It waited. The drone signaled, not with instinct, but intention. Others adjusted their paths, funneling predators into a kill zone that hadn't existed seconds before. Nets missed, plasma bolts struck decoys, the ambush closed with terrifying precision. Above, predator sensors flickered with unfamiliar patterns. Below, the Queen's inner jaws flexed in something like satisfaction. From the wreckage, Park stared at the new data scrolling across her screen, blood draining from her face. "They're changing," she whispered. The hive had learned, and the war had just entered a new phase. The attack failed in silence. Predator scouts entered the hive perimeter expecting resistance, dense, feral, predictable. Instead, they found absence. Corridors once choked with resin were cleared. Heat signatures that should have swarmed toward them pulled back, retreating into the deeper architecture of the nest. The hunters advanced anyway, blades out, cloaks shimmering, as sensors mapped the blackened maze. Then the doors sealed. Resin walls surged up from the floor, hardening instantly, splitting the strike team in half. A plasma bolt detonated against the barrier and barely scarred it. The hive shifted around them, not collapsing, not panicking, rearranging with deliberate intent. From the darkness, something watched. It was larger than a drone, but not a queen. Its carapace was thicker, layered in irregular plates that deflected light and bled heat strangely on predator optics. Where others moved like animals, this one paused, listening, learning. Its elongated head bore scars, melted grooves where plasma had struck and failed to penetrate. When it moved, it did so with purpose. The monster that learned. It raised a claw, and the hive answered. Xenomorphs did not rush. They herded. Drones flowed behind the hunters, cutting off retreat paths, forcing them forward into narrowed corridors lined with vents and vertical shafts. Nets fired and missed empty air. Smart discs curved and returned without blood. The hive had measured those weapons already. A predator roared and charged, spear first. The monster stepped aside, not away, guiding the blow into resin where it stuck fast. Acid sprayed intentionally, not wildly, corroding the spear's haft without touching the monster's own body. A tail lashed out, striking the hunter's knee joint with precise force. Armor buckled. The predator fell. The monster did not kill it. It watched. It observed how the hunter struggled, how its comrades reacted, how they repositioned. Then it signaled again. Subtle, chemical, commanding. Drones surged from vents above, dropping in coordinated arcs that overwhelmed the remaining hunters. Plasma fire filled the corridor, but the monster stayed back, letting others die for data. When the last predator disengaged, leaping through a collapsing access shaft, the monster followed to the edge and stopped. It did not pursue beyond its territory. It had learned enough. Above ground, the consequences were immediate. Predator clans adjusted patrol routes and then abandoned entire districts altogether. Motion trackers showed hives expanding unchallenged in zones marked red, no fly, no hunt. Hunters began circling those areas instead of entering them, marking the boundaries with symbols burned into steel and concrete. Warnings. Harry stood on a rooftop overlooking one such district, rain streaking his visor as he watched the smoke drift upward in lazy spirals. "They're pulling back," he said, disbelief thick in his voice. Park studied the data feed scrolling across her tablet. Failed predator strikes, missing teams, sudden tactical withdrawals. "They don't retreat," she whispered. "Not like this." A scream echoed from below as a human patrol was ambushed. Drones dropping from angles that shouldn't have been exposed, cutting off exits before the first shot could be fired. The assault was clean, efficient, over in seconds. Park's hands trembled. It's not just reacting anymore. Inside the hive, the monster moved to a central chamber where the queen rested. It did not challenge her. It did not bow. It stood at her flank, head tilted, exchanging information through pheromones too complex for human instruments to decode. The queen shifted, adjusting brood deployment patterns, accelerating growth in strategic nodes. She trusted it. Elsewhere, a predator elder watched the same data and felt something unfamiliar settle into its chest. Concern. This prey did not merely survive the hunt, it adapted to it, learned from it, turned the hunter's own tactics back upon them. The elder clicked sharply, issuing new protocols: avoidance, observation, containment. Honor could wait. Survival could not. The monster returned to the outer hive, positioning itself near the boundary where predators no longer crossed. It lifted its head as a cloaked scout watched from afar, optics struggling to lock onto its altered thermal profile. The scout hesitated, then withdrew. For the first time since the hunt began, predator territory shrank. Park looked up at the skyline, at the darkened district swelling outward like bruises on the city's skin. "If it keeps learning," she said, a voice barely audible over the wind, "we're not dealing with an infestation anymore." Harris swallowed. Then what are we dealing with? Below them the hive pulsed, alive with intention. The monster settled into its domain, claws resting against the resin floor, eyes reflecting the faint glow of the city it was claiming. An apex intelligence had been born, and even the hunters knew better than to trespass where it ruled. The firefight should have ended with everyone dead. Rain hammered the shattered transit plaza as a human strike team backed into a defensive circle, motion trackers screaming. Xenomorphs moved just beyond sight, above, below, everywhere at once. Harris steadied his rifle, breath ragged, knowing the next surge would be the last. Then the clicking started. Slow, deliberate, not from the hive. A plasma bolt lanced out of the darkness, vaporizing a xenomorph mid-leap. Another followed, precise, surgical, cloaked shapes materialized along the broken platforms. Predators, weapons trained not on the humans, but outward. No one spoke. The xenomorphs hesitated, sensing a shift they didn't understand. That pause was fatal. Smart discs cut glowing arcs through the rain, nets snapped tight, slicing limbs and pinning bodies to concrete. Humans fired when they saw openings, hybrid rounds punching through carapace already weakened by alien blades. The attack collapsed as quickly as it began. When the last drone fell, acid hissing into rainwater, the plaza went still. Steam rose from scorched ground. Humans and predators stood facing one another across a litter of corpses, weapons raised, neither side willing to be the first to lower them. Harris felt the weight of the moment settle into his chest. "Nobody shoot," he said, voice tight. "Just don't." A predator stepped forward, uncloaking fully. Its armor was etched and scarred, one shoulder plate freshly melted. It studied Harris through glowing lenses, head tilting as if weighing him. Then it tapped its wrist computer. A holographic map flared to life between them, subterranean tunnels, hive boundaries, red zones humans hadn't mapped yet. Predator glyphs marked danger areas, patrol routes, dead hunters. Information? Park stepped forward slowly, hands raised. Her eyes flicked between the map and the predator's mask. "You've been watching them," she said, "learning." The predator did not respond verbally. Instead, it expanded the projection, isolating a district marked with warning symbols. At its center pulsed a shape unlike the others, denser, darker. Park's breath caught. The intelligent one. The predator's mandibles flexed once. They didn't shake hands. They didn't exchange names. They simply stood there in the rain, two species that should never have shared space, trading survival data because extinction made strange logic feel reasonable. Over the next hours, the unspoken ceasefire spread, quietly, unevenly. Predator scouts redirected human patrols away from dead zones. Human drones relayed hive movements without interfering in hunts. When clashes happened, they were avoided, redirected, minimized. Trust was never part of it. only math. Harris watched a predator cauterize a tunnel entrance after a human unit evacuated through it, sealing off a hive approach. "I don't like this," he muttered. Park didn't look away from the feeds. Neither do they. Somewhere deeper in the city, the monster that learned observed the pattern shift. Predator incursions decreased. Human movement changed. The hive adapted in response, tightening control, accelerating reproduction in response to perceived collaboration. Pressure built. The ceasefire held until greed cracked it. In a fortified command bunker miles away, a human intelligence officer stared at predator telemetry pouring in through backdoor channels, energy signatures, cloak frequencies, ship trajectories. Opportunity. "If we lock onto their tech now," he said quietly, "we can isolate their ships, capture one, maybe more." A subordinate hesitated. "We have an understanding." The officer's jaw tightened. "We have a chance." The order went out disguised as a routine scan. A targeting array powered up beneath the city, its sensors piggybacking on predator signals shared in good faith. The moment it locked, the sky flared. A predator scout ship screamed as a human interceptor missile clipped its cloaking field. The vessel reeled, venting plasma, crashing into the outskirts in a fireball that lit the horizon. Every predator in the city froze. Then they roared. In the plaza, the predator leader snapped its head skyward as the explosion reflected in its mask. Its posture shifted instantly, cooperation collapsing into fury. Weapons turned. Harris raised his hands again. "Wait," he said. "That wasn't us." But it was human. The predator struck the ground with its spear, carving a deep gouge between them, a line drawn in steel and stone. It activated its wrist computer, broadcasting a sharp, unmistakable signal. The ceasefire was over. Above, more predator ships decloaked, weapons charging. Below, the hive surged, sensing division, preparing to exploit it. Park stared at the burning skyline, realization sinking in like ice. "We just taught all of them the same lesson," she whispered. Harris swallowed. "Which is?" She looked at him, eyes hollow. "That Earth can't be trusted." And in the space between hunters, monsters, and men, the war found new fuel, betrayal. The first flash came over Paris. A molten streak of plasma tore through the night sky, striking the Eiffel Tower with a deafening roar that rattled buildings for kilometers. Fire and smoke rose in jagged spires, sending the terrified city into mass panic. Sirens blared, cars collided in the rain-slicked streets, and below the chaos shadows moved. Dozens of xenomorphs slipping through the wreckage, hunting not for food, but for territory. Soldiers fired blindly into the swarming shapes, hybrid rounds punching holes through walls and ceilings. But the creatures were already gone, reappearing where none could anticipate. Acid hissed against steel barricades, carving channels through defenses with precision, dissolving armored vehicles like wax candles. From the rooftops, predator scouts observed the carnage, cloaks shimmering invisibly. Their weapons glowed faintly in the darkness, pulsing as they calculated trajectories and kill zones. The city was a chessboard, and humans collateral. Plasma cannons and smart discs cut into xenomorph lines with mathematical efficiency. For the predators, casualties were irrelevant. Honor and the hunt demanded supremacy. Harris ducked behind a wrecked bus, rain washing soot from his helmet. "It's spreading too fast," he muttered, eyes scanning the skyline where smoke pillars from multiple sectors marked the monster's advance. "They're not just attacking cities, they're consuming them." Park's tablet lit her face in blue light, displaying thermal overlays of coordinated hive activity. Red pulsing nodes indicated queens directing waves of drones. "They've synchronized," she said, voice tight. "Every hive knows where the others are. This isn't random. It's a campaign." In London, the Thames boiled with fire and resin. Historical bridges crumbled under Xenomorph assault, while predator strike teams descended from orbiting vessels, plasma and blades cutting through streets with ruthless efficiency. Civilians fled wherever they could, but no path was safe. Underground tunnels became traps as predators and xenomorphs alike sealed routes with fire, nets, or resin walls. Somewhere above the chaos, a predator ship tore through clouds, a cathedral of weaponized technology cloaked in shimmering energy fields. Inside, an elder, larger, older, scarred across its mandibles and armor, sat in silence, sensors painting the destruction below. He had watched from the shadows, observing the younger hunter's tactics, noting errors, measuring precision. A low, deliberate roar reverberated through the ship, a promise of judgment. The elder disengaged his cloak, standing as the vessel descended toward the burning capital. Every strike, every collapsed building, every human casualty was now a statement. The hunt was no longer a game. Honor demanded intervention. On the streets, a predator squad pressed their advantage against a swarm of xenomorphs. One hunter swung a wrist blade, cleaving a drone in two. Another fired a shoulder cannon, vaporizing a hive cluster in a brilliant flash. But the more they killed, the more the hives adapted. New formations emerged. Acid sprays were timed to intercept plasma fire. The monster that learned had taught the younger drones coordination, anticipating the predator's maneuvers. Harris felt the weight of impossibility in his chest. "We can't contain this," he said, voice almost lost in the cacophony. "They're tearing through everything. Our cities, our weapons, our plans." Park glanced upward at the shadow of the elder ship as it settled above a central square. "And yet," she said, voice measured, "there's still a hierarchy. Even among them, there's order." The elder emerged from the ship's hatch, landing with deliberate grace amid the devastation. Rain hissed off his armor, mandibles flexing as he surveyed the battlefield. He didn't acknowledge humans, he didn't hesitate at xenomorphs. His gaze swept the carnage, rivers of fire and acid, toppled buildings, and the bodies of hunters who had failed him. Then he roared, a sound that shook windows blocks away, a promise, both of wrath and of discipline. Younger predators froze mid-strike, acknowledging their superior. He advanced through the streets like a living engine of judgment, wrist blades and plasma cannon ready, calculating, methodical. Xenomorphs recoiled, not from fear, but caution. Even the monster that learned paused at the edges of the square, testing, analyzing, unsure if this was prey, rival, or something entirely different. Harris swallowed hard. If he's here, nothing short of total annihilation will satisfy him. Park's eyes tracked the elder's movement. "He's not here for survival," she said softly. "He's here to reclaim honor, by any means necessary." And as fire and acid boiled through the streets, as predator plasma lit the night sky in jagged lethal arcs, a single undeniable truth settled over every human and monster alike. Earth was no longer a battlefield. It was a throne of fire, and the crown had arrived. The city trembled as though it had lungs. Resin cracked and hissed along the cracked streets of downtown Berlin, steam rising from fissures like the breath of some ancient waking god. The monster that learned circled a collapsed cathedral, its claws scraping molten concrete, eyes glowing in dim red light as drones streamed toward it, like tributaries feeding a river of war. Then, from the deepest chamber of the hive, the queen emerged, bigger, deadlier, her crown etched with scars from orbital plasma strikes, yet gleaming with vitality. Every pulse of her carapace seemed to radiate intent. She had adapted. She had evolved. Around her, the drones and surviving xenomorphs moved with purpose, coordinating strikes with a precision no human or predator could anticipate. The air vibrated with hisses, clicks, and the low roar of a predator-aware organism, a symphony of calculated violence. Harris crouched behind the remnants of a half-collapsed street lamp, rain streaking his helmet visor, watching the scene with disbelief. She's organizing them, like she's running the war herself. Park didn't respond at first, eyes fixed on her tablet tracking thermal anomalies. It's worse than we thought, she muttered. This queen isn't just intelligent. She's designing them, optimizing them, mutating them. Harris's stomach turned as a new wave of drones erupted from sub-levels of the cathedral. Their exoskeletons shimmered with a faint metallic blue, reflecting predator plasma fire without damage. Bolts slammed into them, sizzling ineffectively. This was the Apex Queen's first breed, stronger, faster, resistant. Even seasoned predators faltered, shields overloaded, plasma casters cutting shallow lines through what would have been mere mortal armor. From the sky, predator ships decloaked in response, orbital cannons igniting with a white-hot roar. The ground quaked under the fire, leveling ruined streets and vaporizing entire clusters of drones. Younger predators leapt from rooftops, wrist blades gleaming, blades slicing into acid-flecked exoskeletons. The humans scrambled for cover, their hybrid rifles sputtering against the adaptive carapaces. Yet the Apex Queen moved with calm intent. She had learned the rhythm of predator assaults, predicting arcs of plasma fire, guiding her brood through safe corridors and counterattacks. Drones fell upon hunters from angles no cloaking device could hide, tails snapping, inner jaws latching, and armor melting under precise acid strikes. Predators that had once commanded fear now hesitated, calculating, reassessing, for the first time on Earth, uncertain of victory. Harris shouted to Park, voice barely audible over the storm and gunfire. "We need to get out of here. This isn't a fight we can survive." Park shook her head, eyes fixed on the Queen's movements. "No, we need to watch. We need to see, understand how far she's evolved." The Apex Queen paused at the top of the cathedral's shattered spire, surveying the chaos she had wrought. Her carapace gleamed with wet black resin, dripping down towards the ground. Her drones formed a defensive perimeter, pulsating with lethal intent, while smaller xenomorphs scouted the streets like deadly scouts. And then she let out a single resonant hiss that echoed through the hollowed cityscape, a sound that vibrated in the bones of both man and predator. High above, predator sensors flickered as ships scanned the horizon, searching for weak points, but none appeared. One scout activated its risk computer, reporting anomalies in the Queen's new brood. The data flooded every predator vessel. Exoskeletons immune to plasma, speed beyond measured limits, coordinated hive intelligence that rivaled even their own tactical algorithms. The Elder roared from his flagship, mandibles snapping, armor glinting in the storm's lightning. He activated the vessel's primary weapons, ancient cannons, plasma lances, cloaking pulses, but still the Queen's new brood moved as though she were everywhere at once, adapting faster than any predator could anticipate. Harris swallowed hard, eyes on the sky. She's going after them. The ships. She's targeting their vessels next. Park's lips pressed into a thin line. The balance of power has shifted, and Earth is no longer a battlefield humans can survive. The Apex Queen flexed her inner jaws, tail whipping in measured arcs, claws digging into the shattered spire. From below, drones scuttled into the streets, shimmering with evolved armor. In the distance, predator plasma fire lit the night like fleeting stars, but even the brightest bursts seemed futile. And in that moment, the world understood. This queen was not merely a survivor. She was a conqueror. She had learned. She had evolved. And nothing, not humans, not the predator clans, not even the Elder himself, could stand in her way without first proving they were worthy. The rain fell harder, washing ash and debris into the streets. Fires burned unchecked, buildings crumbled, and the apex queen's shadow stretched over the city like a crown of darkness. Harris and Park exchanged a glance that carried a single, unspoken truth. The war had changed. The predator of predators was no longer the Elder. The queen had risen. And now, the hunt was coming for the hunters themselves. The sky over the Pacific Rim burned with streaks of plasma and fire. Predator strongholds, once impregnable fortresses carved into the cliffs and urban ruins, now lay in smoldering ruin. The apex queen had unleashed her new brood across every continent, striking with precision, speed, and intelligence that even the Elder could not anticipate. Trophies, the mandibles, skulls, and relics of centuries were strewn and shattered, desecrated in acid and flame. Inside one such stronghold, high above the mangled city streets, Elder predators gathered around the shattered altar of honor, claws clenched on scorched hilts. Smoke curled from collapsed walls. The youngest hunters trembled, mandibles snapping nervously. For the first time, the hierarchy wavered. The hunt had reversed. Predators were now hunted. From the shadows of the ruined courtyard, drones erupted, sleek and lethal, acid sizzling where plasma had scorched them. The apex queen's influence radiated like a pulse. Her brood moved as one organism, calculating risk, exploiting gaps in armor and strategy. Even cloaked hunters were ripped from rooftops, dragged into the streets, acid burning through gauntlets and chest plates alike. Screams echoed, guttural and robotic at once, the sound of predators learning fear. Harris crouched behind a fractured steel beam, binoculars tracking the carnage. "They're everywhere," he muttered, voice tight. "Even the Elder. He can't stop this." Park adjusted her scope, eyes narrowing at the sight of the Elder himself, armor scorched and mandibles flexing with rage. He moved like a tidal wave, his wrist blades flashing, plasma cannons cutting through drones mid-leap, yet the apex queen anticipated every maneuver. The younger brood funneled him into narrow alleys, acid corroding the ground around him, forcing him into brutal close-quarters combat. Every strike the Elder landed was met with immediate counters, more drones rushing in to test weaknesses he didn't know he had. From above, orbital predator ships fired in desperation, lancing the city with destructive arcs, yet the apex queen's scouts diverted attacks, her brood using the rubble and heat signatures to disappear and reappear, always one step ahead. Inside the stronghold, trophies fell, skulls shattered, mandibles cleaved, relics melted. The Elder roared, voice carrying across the ruined city, a sound that had once commanded obedience, now defying the inevitability of death. His warriors fell one by one. Honor could not save them. Those that survived scrambled for evacuation tunnels, only to find corridors sealed with hardened resin. The queen's brood waiting silently, calculating strikes. Harris turned to Park, eyes wide. If she keeps this up, there won't be a predator left on Earth. Park swallowed hard, scanning for survivors. There might be one chance. The Elder isn't finished. He never is. From the wreckage of a collapsed plaza, the Elder's signal pulsed, a call across the remnants of his fleet. Every surviving hunter, every cloaked ship responded. Harris felt the air charge as energy fields hummed, weapons powering up to levels no human had ever witnessed. It was more than a last stand. It was a contingency, a final gambit, a plan designed not just to reclaim honor, but to obliterate what had dared rise against them. Harris's gaze followed the massive energy signatures as they converged above the city. What is he doing? Park's voice was barely audible. Whatever it is, it could end everything. Below, the Apex Queen observed, tail flicking, drones repositioning in response to the new threat. The Predator's gambit was vast, unprecedented, but she was ready. Her brood adapted instantly, exploiting the gaps the Elder's plan created, striking with surgical precision. A shockwave rattled the ground. Buildings that had survived bombardment for hours collapsed in an instant. Humans in the streets scattered, barely able to comprehend the scale of power now being unleashed. Even the monster that learned flexed its claws, sensing the Elder's plan in motion, understanding the danger in ways no one could yet measure. Harris gritted his teeth, voice shaking with awe and fear. This isn't a hunt anymore. It's extinction. Park's eyes never left the feeds. The war is tipping again, but this time, everyone, predator, human, xenomorph, could be wiped off the board. In the heart of the ruined stronghold, the Elder raised his head to the storm sky, mandibles flexing in silent defiance. He would gamble everything on this final strike. He would risk Earth itself for honor. And the Apex Queen, watching from the shadows, understood perfectly. A new phase of the war had begun, one where even gods might fall as the sky burned like liquid metal. From orbit, Predator command vessels hung over the shattered continents, massive warships bristling with weaponry no human had ever seen, hulls humming with alien energy. Cities lay in ruin beneath, smoke and fire coiling into storm clouds that blotted out the sun. From within the flagship bridge, the Elder Predator's mandibles flexed as he surveyed the devastation. The Apex Queen had not merely survived, she had thrived, evolving her brood, striking with precision, overwhelming every strike. And now, honor demanded a verdict. Below, human resistance factions scrambled through fractured streets, their hybrid rifles loaded, drones activated, makeshift barricades erected from the carcasses of fallen xenomorphs and predator scouts. Harris pressed his back against a scorched wall, rain lashing his helmet, eyes locked on the horizon. They're talking about annihilating the planet, he hissed. Not just stopping her. Everything? Park's fingers flew across her tablet, monitoring predator comms intercepted through hijacked relays. Energy surges pulsed across orbital weapon systems, targeting coordinates spanning entire continents. Scorched planet protocol, she said, voice trembling. They'll fire on everything. Humans, xenomorphs, predators who fail. They'll erase it all. A low hum filled the streets as orbital beams charged, heat building until even the city's crumbling structures seemed to tremble. Harris's team ducked beneath a collapsed overpass, the air thick with ozone and acid. If they do this, he whispered, there won't be anything left to fight for. Meanwhile, the Apex Queen rose above the ruins atop the remnants of the Reichstag. Her carapace shimmered wet black under rain, eyes glowing with cold calculation. The new brood, faster, stronger, and immune to plasma, moved around her with fluid precision, linking attacks and positioning to dominate every battlefield. She had watched the predators marshal their ultimate weapon, and she made a choice. Waiting would be suicide. A volley of drones surged ahead, acid sizzling in synchronized arcs, targeting the heavily armed human resistance as if they were pawns in a cosmic game. Harris opened fire, hybrid rounds punching through carapace, but more drones emerged from subterranean tunnels, rerouting mid-strike, guiding survivors into kill zones. The Apex Queen's intelligence was unprecedented. Each movement was a counter, each strategy preemptive. High above, the Elder's flagship released a pulse that flared across the atmosphere, warning satellites cascading into the ocean in molten fire. Energy beams converged on multiple continents, their targets precise. Hive locations, strategic human centers, even predator-claimed territories. Extinction hung on a knife's edge. Park grabbed Harris's arm. "We can't just hide. If they fire, nothing survives." Her eyes darted to the thermal scans. Entire hives would be vaporized in the next strike. "We have to stop them, or redirect them, somehow." Harris clenched his jaw, staring at the approaching doom. "We're not a fleet. We're nothing compared to that." Below, the Apex Queen flexed her inner jaws, tail lashing, wings of reinforced exoskeleton twitching with lethal energy. She sent her brood surging upward, acid melting the streets, smashing through barricades, targeting any interference with deadly precision. This was not merely defense. This was a preemptive strike, her final offensive. Predator cannons fired, lightning tearing across the city, obliterating blocks in blinding arcs. But the Queen's drones dodged, split and returned, exploiting every exposed weakness, forcing Elders to recalibrate, falter, and hesitate. The humans scrambled in the chaos, trying to plant feedback devices, hoping to short-circuit orbital targeting. Sparks rained from broken electronics, fires consumed shattered vehicles. And yet the Queen's forces adapted with terrifying efficiency, her brood predicting every maneuver. Harris and Park ducked as a plasma beam slammed into a nearby plaza, throwing concrete and flame around them. She's attacking now!" Harris shouted, voice hoarse, "before they can sterilize the planet!" Park's eyes widened. "If she hits hard enough, she could destroy their weapons. And us too, if we're caught in the wrong zone." From above, the Elder's roar reverberated across the stricken city, a declaration of judgment. But the Apex Queen responded in kind, hissing, a resonance that carried through alleys and tunnels and the rain-soaked streets. Her drones surged in waves, targeting human resistance with precision. Predator scouts with lethal calculation, and structures holding orbital weapons with acid and brute force. The countdown on orbital weapons continued, every pulse of energy bringing potential annihilation closer. Below, humans scrambled, predators reeled, and the Queen's brood advanced, intelligent, relentless, unstoppable. Harris looked at Park, eyes wide with horror. This is it. Extinction or survival. And she's starting the fight first. Park swallowed hard, watching the Apex Queen flex her claws and tail, commanding the streets like a general orchestrating total war. "We're about to find out," she said softly, voice tight, "who Earth really belongs to." The storm raged harder, rain and acid mixing into a haze of fire and shadow. And in the skies above, predator ships charged, targeting locked, but the Queen was already striking. Earth's fate hung in balance, and the first move had been made. The night sky tore open in fire. Above the Atlantic, predator vessels tore through the low orbit, plasma cannons igniting clouds of debris from shattered satellites. Acid-corroded fragments of xenomorph-infested stations floated like dead stars, hissing and erupting in bursts of molten metal. The Apex Queen's influence had reached orbit. The monster that learned had adapted to zero gravity, coordinating swarms of drones to hijack stations, turning humanity's space assets into weapons against their own world. Harris clutched the edge of a floating debris field, tethered to the hull of a derelict orbital relay. Rain didn't reach this height, but the cold burned through his suit. His visor flickered as thermal scans revealed dozens of xenomorph drones scuttling across station exteriors, acid sizzling against steel plating. "They've adapted to space," he muttered, voice tight with disbelief. "Nothing we've seen can survive this." Park's fingers danced over the tablet strapped to her arm, overlaying predator sensor data with her own calculations. "She's replicating hive behavior up here, moving drones across stations, linking attacks, rerouting power. Even the orbital cannons are compromised." From the flagship bridge, the elder predator barked commands, wrist blades clashing against consoles in frustration. He had anticipated global warfare, but orbital infestation was unprecedented. Swarms of drones skidded across his vessel's hulls, acid burning through armor, disrupting energy conduits, forcing rapid evasive maneuvers. Plasma cannons pivoted, unleashing waves of fire, but the Queen's swarms twisted through the blast with fluid preemptive calculation. Harris swallowed hard as a smaller predator fighter collided with a rogue drone, hull breaches spitting plasma sparks into the void. They're losing out here," he muttered, the words tasting like ash. Park glanced toward Earth, visible through the observation window. Scorched continents glimmered with smoke and fire. Lightning crackling in storms fed by orbital bombardment. Cities had become scarred, continents blistered. Even from orbit, the damage was undeniable. Humanity's home was a battlefield visible to the stars themselves. "It's no longer just Earth," she said softly. "The war, it's everywhere now." A predator strike team, smaller and faster, descended toward a massive xenomorph hive embedded within the core of a ruined orbital station. Cloaking devices flickered against surveillance systems, sensors dancing between the Queen's control grids. Their objective was near suicidal. Infiltrate the heart of the Apex Queen's network and plant feedback disruptors capable of severing her hive link. Harris's heart hammered as he watched them navigate the wreckage. Plasma fire streaked past them, drones ricocheting off hull plates, acid sizzling in their wake. One hunter swung a wrist blade, severing a scuttling drone in two, only to have another land mid-leap, hissing and snapping. Every move was a gamble, every breath could be their last. Park's voice cracked in the comms. "They're close. If they can breach the core, we might give Earth a chance to breathe." Inside the station, the Apex Queen flexed her tail, mandibles clicking as she coordinated her orbital brood. Energy grids flared under her influence, shields strengthened, drones reorganizing in seconds. She had learned to anticipate predator strategy, predicting movements with intelligence no human or hunter had ever calculated. And yet she sensed the intruders, smaller, slower, but cunning. Armed with hybrid tech capable of severing her hive network if executed perfectly. The first predator fell, dragged into a shaft by acid-slick claws. Sparks erupted as wrist blades met reinforced carapace, but the swarm was relentless. Another hunter pivoted mid-leap, firing a plasma shot that disintegrated a drone, but even as it fell, three more replaced it instantly, their movements orchestrated like a deadly dance. Harris pressed his face to the viewport. They're actually trying to get inside her core." Park's hands trembled on the console. If they succeed, it could cripple her network long enough for Earth's defenses to recalibrate. But if they fail... A colossal explosion rocked the station, throwing debris into space. Plasma arcs igniting nearby hulls. Alarms shrieked, lights flickered, and the Apex Queen's hissing resonance echoed through the void, a warning and a taunt simultaneously. Harris's chest tightened. This is bigger than we imagined. She's not just fighting us on the planet, she's turning the sky itself into her battlefield. Park's eyes narrowed. And the Queen, She's aware of the strike team. She knows they're coming. From the debris-littered void, the cloaked hunters pressed forward, silhouette after silhouette darting between flames, plasma, and acid. The war had left Earth visibly scarred from space, but now the decisive battle was moving into the Queen's core, a final gambit that could shift the fate of the planet. And above it all, the Apex Queen flexed her claws and tail, ready to strike at the invaders, already anticipating the humans' next move. Harris whispered, voice barely audible over the void. The sky. It's alive, and we're walking into the heart of it. The war had left Earth wounded, and now it would be tested beyond anything humanity had ever endured. The air inside the hive was thick with resin and the metallic tang of blood. Harris's boots crunched over fractured xenomorph carapaces, acid sizzling into the concrete floor beneath. The ceiling pulsed, alive, dripping with glistening strands that seemed almost to breathe. Shadows danced across walls of black chitin, moving unnaturally, impossibly, guided by the Apex Queen herself. Every step forward felt like trespassing in a cathedral built by nightmares. Park pressed her back against a jagged pillar, eyes scanning the hive's labyrinthine corridors. Her flashlight barely cut through the darkness, illuminating the twitching forms of drones scuttling overhead. "We're deep inside her core," she whispered, voice shaking. "She knows we're here." Ahead, predator hunters led the human predator strike team. Cloaking devices flickered on and off as sensors flared with the Queen's presence. Each corridor branched into an impossible maze. Walls moved slightly as though the hive itself were alive, guiding attackers toward death. One wrong turn, and the acid traps embedded in the floors and walls would claim them. Harris swallowed hard, gripping his hybrid rifle tighter. Every instinct screamed retreat, but the mission left no room for hesitation. A hiss echoed from the shadows, low, resonant, intelligent. It was followed by the scrape of claws against chitin, a sound that froze blood in veins. A lone xenomorph emerged from the darkness, its eyes glinting with unholy intelligence. One of the younger predators lunged, wrist blades flashing, but the creature moved with calculated precision, dodging, snapping, striking. Acid spat across the floor, narrowly missing Park. She recoiled, firing her rifle, hybrid rounds tearing through exoskeleton. The creature fell, but two more replaced it instantly. Harris's helmet camera flickered as the team pushed deeper. A wave of drones surged from overhead platforms, swarming like living shadows. Plasma fire and wrist blades flashed, screams and hisses merging into a chaotic symphony. Each step forward demanded sacrifice. One hunter fell, pulled into the darkness by snapping jaws, mandibles clattering on steel before disappearing. Harris turned away, stomach knotting, but there was no time to mourn. The path forward demanded grim resolve. The hive's heart approached, a chamber vast beyond imagination, walls spiraling upward like the inside of a cathedral carved from obsidian. Bioluminescent veins pulsed with life, lighting the room with an eerie green glow. At its center lay the Apex Queen, massive, her carapace scarred from orbital strikes, yet radiating lethal intent. Her brood formed a moving wall around her, drones and smaller xenomorphs interlocking in patterns that defied any known strategy. Park activated her tablet, scanning hive energy networks. "If we disrupt her core here, we might cripple the network long enough to give Earth a chance," she murmured. "But the cost?" Harris didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the Queen, noting the way she flexed her tail, inner jaws twitching, each movement deliberate. "The cost is unbearable," he whispered. They advanced, firing, slashing, sacrificing. Plasma arcs tore through walls, acid sprayed in return, and yet the Apex Queen's coordinated defense adapted instantly, anticipating each move. One predator threw himself at her flank, sacrificing his life to allow a human to plant a feedback disruptor. The device sparked, sensors flaring, energy feeding back into the hive. The queen hissed, pain rippling across her chitin, tail lashing wildly. But she was not dead, not even close. The chamber shook as she reared back, wounded but defiant. Her brood recoiled slightly, stunned by the strike, but immediately regrouped. Intelligence radiated from her presence, a cold, calculating awareness that outmatched any predator tactic, any human ingenuity. The feedback disruptor had bought time, but only seconds. Harris knelt beside a fallen comrade, blood streaking his face, eyes wide with exhaustion and horror. We actually hit her, he said, voice hoarse, but she's still alive. Park's gaze never left the Queen, alive and smarter. She's learning from the attack already. From the ceiling, drones began to realign, acid sizzling where it met scorched metal. The apex queen's tail lashed again, striking with lethal precision, taking out 2 hunters in one swing. A new wave of drones scuttled down corridors, cutting off retreat paths. Every step out of the hive would be a gamble. Harris glanced at Park. We've wounded her, but the war isn't over. Not even close. Park swallowed hard, voice tight. And the next move? She decides. We're deep inside her world now. She's hunting us. The chamber pulsed once more with life, walls vibrating, as the apex queen flexed her claws, mandibles clicking in calculated menace. The black nest was alive, aware, and the humans and hunters inside had survived by inches. Their sacrifices, a mere opening salvo in a battle far from finished. Above, the world waited, scarred from orbit. Below, the apex queen breathed, wounded yet unstoppable. Her awareness expanding. Harris whispered, eyes locked on the creature. We've entered her world, and she's not letting us leave. The air vibrated with raw tension as the battlefield stretched beneath a sky streaked with ash and fire. Entire city blocks had been reduced to skeletal frames. Streets were rivers of molten steel and acid runoff. The scent of ozone and charred metal thick in the air. Somewhere in the distance, the apex queen's brood moved in perfect coordination, her intelligence radiating outward like a dark pulse, watching, waiting. But she did not anticipate this one. The lone predator crouched atop a crumbling skyscraper, cloak flickering against the storm-lit sky. Mandibles flexed, muscles coiled beneath plated armor, and wrist blades gleamed with unspent fury. He was not here for honor or trophies. Not this time. Survival demanded every ounce of skill, every trick learned across centuries. Below, the apex queen loomed over the shattered streets, massive and terrifying, wings of hardened exoskeleton flaring, tail whipping with lethal force. Her hissing resonated through the ruins, a call and a warning simultaneously. Harris, pinned behind a fractured steel girder, watched with wide, unblinking eyes. Park's hand gripped his shoulder. If he fails, she whispered, there won't be anything left. The predator leapt, dropping into the open with preternatural grace, wrist blades igniting as plasma arcs cut through the ash-laden air. The queen's tail lashed upwards, striking the building beneath him, sending debris raining down in molten shards. He rolled, blades slicing through the air, cutting a drone mid-flight, sparks and acid hissing in the explosion. The queen moved with terrifying intelligence, anticipating each strike. Her drone surged around her like a living shield, acid spitting, claws swiping at anything daring enough to approach. She hissed again, jaws flexing, clicking with awareness that outmatched any previous encounters. Yet the predator pressed forward, a single-minded force threading through chaos, every leap and strike calculated to survive the unthinkable. The streets shuddered as the first collision occurred. A wrist blade met hardened carapace with a metallic screech. Plasma fire scorched the Queen's flank, leaving deep burns, yet she did not falter. Her tail struck again, demolishing a nearby vehicle and sending concrete slabs tumbling. Sparks ignited in the twisted wreckage, and the Predator vaulted onto a fallen beam, pivoting mid-air, slicing through a drone before landing amidst scattered debris. Harris felt his chest tighten. He's actually keeping up. Park's fingers trembled over her scanner. Not keeping up. He's drawing her in. He knows something we don't. The Predator darted forward and exploiting a gap as the Queen's drone shifted to counter him. Wrist blades stabbed into her flank, plasma igniting through carapace, and she hissed in a sound that reverberated through Harris's bones. The Queen spun, tail lashing with lethal precision, slamming the Predator against a half-collapsed tower. Armor dented, wrist blades sparking, he rolled away, leaving streaks of blood in his wake, but his resolve remained unbroken. The duel escalated, reshaping the battlefield. Entire streets became a blur of motion. Acid-seared concrete, plasma fire scorched the sky, debris spun like deadly projectiles. The Predator's cloak flickered, breaking invisibility, only to strike again, each movement forcing the Queen to anticipate and adapt. Harris's jaw tightened, watching from the ruins below. He's making her bleed. The Apex Queen hissed, staggering slightly as deep plasma burns ignited along her carapace. Yet even wounded, she moved with predatory elegance, intelligence guiding every strike, counter, and swipe. The Predator leapt again, landing behind her, blades sinking deep into exposed flanks. Acid sprayed, narrowly missing him, sizzling against the fractured concrete. For a heartbeat, the battlefield seemed suspended. Time slowed. The Predator's gaze met the Queen's, mandibles flexing in silent understanding. This was survival, not conquest. One mistake meant death, not just for him, but for any remaining hope of resistance below. Then, with a roar that shook steel and stone, the Queen twisted, tail striking hard enough to send the Predator sprawling. He rolled, blades extended, and with a brutal surge of strength, launched himself upwards, slashing across her chest in a perfect arc. The Apex Queen staggered, wings folding back, hissing in pain. Blood streaked across black carapace, but she did not fall, not yet. Harris exhaled slowly, a voice barely audible. She's wounded, but not dead. Park's eyes widened. If he fails, there's no coming back. But if he succeeds... The Predator crouched, breathing ragged, blade still ignited, scanning for the next move. The Apex Queen rose, wounded yet terrifying, intelligence and fury combining in an aura that threatened to consume everything. Harris swallowed hard. Everything rests on this moment, this duel. Above and around them, the battlefield continued to burn. Buildings toppled, acid hissed, plasma flared, and the world held its breath. For the first time, Predator and monster faced off not for trophies, not for honor, but for survival itself. And as the Predator lunged once more, blades flashing, the Apex Queen's tail flexed, eyes glowing with cunning awareness. The duel ended, for now. But the war, the true war, did not. The ground trembled under the weight of silence. Where once teemed a city alive with lights and voices, only skeletal ruins remained. Skyscrapers were fractured, steel beams twisted like blackened bones, reaching toward a storm-choked sky. Acid fires smoldered in collapsed streets, seeping into rubble, hissing against scorched concrete. Harris stood amid the devastation, helmet visor cracked, eyes bloodshot from weeks of fire, smoke, and relentless warfare. He could barely believe what he saw. The Apex Queen lay motionless, her immense body sprawled across what had been the heart of the city. Her carapace, once a glistening black fortress of lethal intelligence, now glowed with streaks of plasma burns and scorched flesh. She was dead, or at least incapacitated beyond recovery. Park crouched beside him, scanning the horizon with trembling hands. We did it, she whispered, voice raw. She's gone. Harris's mouth opened, then closed. Words felt empty in the presence of such devastation. Streets were lined with the bodies of humans and xenomorphs alike. Predator trophies, once symbols of honor, were scattered and desecrated, marking the cost of a war that had no winners. Even the orbital firebombing had left scars in the soil, cratered landscapes where neighborhoods had once stood. Above, the last Predator vessels rotated their cloaking energy, slowly withdrawing from orbit. Mandibles flexed in silent acknowledgement. Their hunt, brutal and precise, was over. The Elder's voice, though unintelligible to human ears, carried an unmistakable finality. No more would they claim trophies here. Earth had been tested, and while it had survived, the cost had been astronomical. Harris stepped over a fallen Predator scout, plasma burns cutting through armor, and felt the weight of the finality pressing against his chest. "It's over," he muttered, yet the word tasted hollow. The Queen was gone, yes, but everything she had reshaped, destroyed and claimed would remain. Cities were gone, infrastructure annihilated, populations decimated. The survivors, if they were lucky, would inherit a world unrecognizable. Park's gaze drifted upward, beyond the ruined skyline, toward the pale light of the orbiting warships. "They're leaving," she said quietly, declaring the hunt concluded. But at what cost? Even the streets were eerily silent, save for the crackle of acid fires and the occasional collapse of weakened steel. The echoes of combat, the hiss of xenomorphs, the roar of predators, the blast of plasma were gone, replaced by a void that seemed almost unnatural. The battle that had raged across continents, through cities and into orbit, had ended. Yet the Earth itself bore the memory of it, scarred and trembling. Harris's helmet had flickered, picking up residual energy signatures, small, sporadic, erratic readings deep in the rubble. "Wait. Sensors," he said, voice tense. "Something's moving. Not much, but signals. They're faint, almost like communication." Park leaned over, eyes widening. "From the Queen?" "No," Harris whispered, "from her brood. Some survived. They're gone from the city, but they're out there somewhere." The wind howled through fractured streets, carrying ash and the faint hiss of something alien. Even as the predators disappeared into orbit, leaving the world in ruins, the faint signals pulsed. Low, methodical, intelligent. The Apex Queen might be dead, but her legacy, her hive, had not entirely vanished. Somewhere in the vast shadows of Earth or beyond, it waited, listening, adapting, planning. Harris pressed his helmet's visor to the sky, focusing on the retreating Predator vessels. "We won," he said, voice hollow. "But it doesn't feel like it. Everything's gone." Park's hands rested on his shoulder. "Victory, yes, but survival, that's another question. And whatever's out there, it's only a matter of time." The ruined streets stretched endlessly, littered with the detritus of war. Burned-out vehicles, broken walls, shattered plasma canisters, acid pools reflecting the red sky. Humanity had survived barely, but every step forward would be into a world that remembered the firestorm, the hive, and the Predator's judgment. Above, the last Predator ship blinked out of sight, leaving a sky streaked with ash and scarred clouds. Harris and Park exchanged a look, silent acknowledgement passing between them. The battle was over, but the war, the threat, was far from finished. and in the infinite darkness of space, faint signals pulsed from beyond Earth's orbit, a lingering whisper of the Xenomorph brood. Though the Queen lay dead, her echo had not vanished. Somewhere, deep in shadow and void, life, alien, intelligent, relentless, waited. Harris swallowed, voice tight. We destroyed the Queen, but something else is coming. Park nodded slowly, eyes locked on the horizon, the ruin-strewn city beneath them. Ashes of a world, she said, and it's only the beginning. The Earth lay in silence, scarred, bleeding, but still alive. And the signals in the void? They waited. The morning sun rose weakly over a fractured skyline, casting pale gold over streets still scarred from fire and acid. Smoke coiled from collapsed towers like the restless ghosts of what had been, curling into the clouds that carried the faint scent of ozone and death. Humanity survivors moved cautiously through the rubble, boots crunching on blackened concrete, eyes scanning shadows for movement that might never come, but might return. Every corner of every city was a reminder. The Earth they had known was gone, replaced with a scarred, vigilant world. Harris walked alongside Park, both wearing dust-streaked tactical suits, helmets off for the first time in weeks. Their faces were drawn, marked with soot and exhaustion, but their eyes burned with a resolve forged in fire. We rebuilt schools over bunkers, roads over craters, Park said quietly, scanning a street littered with twisted metal. But nothing will ever be the same. Every city, every town is a monument to what we survived, and what we'll never forget. Harris nodded, stepping over a shattered drone, its blackened chassis still smouldering. They'll remember us too, he muttered. The predators, the Queen, even the brood out there. He lifted a hand, shielding his eyes as sunlight glinted off distant construction cranes, attempting repairs. Earth isn't neutral anymore. Every system in orbit, every signal out there, they'll know this planet has teeth. The survivors weren't idle, using fragments of predator technology scavenged from orbit and from downed vessels. Engineers worked to rebuild defenses, creating hybrid weapons that bent both human ingenuity and alien design. Streets buzzed with drones repurposed for protection, plasma turrets mounted on rebuilt structures, and sensor arrays stretching like skeletal spines into the sky. Humanity was not just rebuilding. They were learning, adapting, weaponizing knowledge that had once been forbidden. A faint vibration ran through Harris's portable HUD, a soft, persistent pulse unlike anything he'd encountered. Park glanced at his console, eyes narrowing. Sensors are picking up something. Harris froze. Here? No, beyond the solar system, Park said, her voice a mixture of awe and fear. It's faint but structured, deliberate, not natural. Across the recovering cities, human eyes turned skyward, scanning the heavens that had once rained fire. Communication satellites blinked back into operation, spreading the news in flashes of static and signal bursts. The Earth was alive again, but watched, measured, and recorded. Humanity's survival had made the planet a beacon, a scarred signal in the void. Harris crouched beside a partially restored command center. He ran his fingers over a predator plasma conduit embedded in the wall. We survived because we learned their rules, stole their tools, but they'll be back. Not just the Queen's brood, others. The hunt never ends. Park's hand hovered over a map detailing both terrestrial rebuilding and orbital defenses. The signals from the Queen. Fragments of her brood remain, she said. Even if they're scattered, every moment we ignore them, they adapt, evolve. We may have won the war, but the war isn't over. It's a shadow we carry forward. Above the horizon, the sky glimmered with a dozen reconstructed orbital platforms. Some were human, some hybrid, all alert. Drones patrolled silent corridors of space, sensors scanning for anomalies, plasma turrets ready to fire. Earth's children were learning the rules of the hunt, but at a cost. Paranoia was permanent, and fear had become a tool as vital as any weapon. Harris stood at the edge of a cratered park, watching humans reclaim their world slowly, methodically, with hands that trembled but refused to quit. "We rebuild, yes," he said, "but we'll always be ready, because the universe doesn't forget a scarred planet." Park tilted her head, her eyes reflecting sunlight and ruin. "And whatever's out there now, it knows we exist. A new predator, a new threat, or worse. The signal's structured, intelligence, intent." A distant hum reached their ears, faint at first, then unmistakable. A pulse traveling across the stars. Beyond the solar system, beyond the orbiting platforms and Earth's fragile defenses, something answered their survival. Harris exhaled slowly, tension threading through his voice. "We've survived the fire. We've survived the hunt. But the galaxy is watching now." Park's hand rested on his shoulder, gaze fixed on the glimmering sky. "A scarred tomorrow, Harris. That's all we have now. The Earth belongs to no one, not fully, not yet." And in the silence between rebuilding and vigilance, the new signal pulsed again. Calculated, deliberate, intelligent. Humanity's victory had been hard won, but the universe had already begun to respond. A scarred Earth, rising from ashes, had marked itself for something larger, something unknown, something that would not forget. The future was uncertain, but one truth remained. The hunt had changed forever. The blackness of space stretched endlessly, cold and indifferent, studded with distant suns and the faint shimmer of alien vessels. Orbiting Earth, the planet's scarred surface glowed faintly beneath storm-choked clouds. Cities half rebuilt, yet still etched with the jagged scars of fire, acid, and war. Humanity moved cautiously, each step a reminder of the devastation the Apex Queen had unleashed and the Predator's judgment that had followed. But from orbit, from the void beyond, something new watched, calculating. Harris stood atop the skeletal remains of a once grand space elevator, eyes scanning the heavens. His helmet lay at his feet, visor cracked but clear enough to catch the glint of distant signals flickering in orbit. "We thought we'd seen the worst," he muttered, voice low, almost a whisper against the wind whipping around steel beams. "We survived the Queen, the Predators, everything. But out there, something else is waiting." Park joined him, cloak tattered, boots scraping debris, eyes never leaving the sky. "The sensors picked up anomalies," she said. "Not local, not ours. Something, someone is observing, waiting for a chance to test us, test Earth." Below them, the streets of the new cities hummed with cautious life. Drones patrolled, plasma turrets pivoted silently atop partially restored buildings, and the survivors carried the knowledge of forbidden technology like a shield against the universe. Children played in patched-up parks while soldiers and engineers reinforced bridges, tunnels, and orbital defenses alike. Humanity had rebuilt, yes, but the shadows of the hunt lingered. Fear had become instinct, vigilance a second nature. Above, the stars pulsed faintly, as if the universe itself were exhaling, noticing Earth for the first time as something more than a neutral rock spinning in space. Signals rippled out from the solar system, structured and deliberate, almost intelligent, subtle, yet unmistakably aware. The scars of battle had marked the planet, and those who saw them understood the story etched into every ruined skyline, every cratered city. Harris clenched his fist, jaw tight. We survived because we fought. We adapted. We learned their rules. But now, the hunt has eyes bigger than anything we've faced. Park placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. The Queen is gone. The predators withdrew. We've survived what was supposed to be the end. But survival doesn't mean safety. It never does. From orbit, faint shapes moved, vessels cloaked against sensors, scanning, recording. Their technology was alien, elegant, and cold, designed not for compassion, not for preservation, but for assessment. Earth had become a test bed, its inhabitants a species newly forged in fire and blood. And somewhere among those ships, beings older, faster, and more lethal than anything humanity had yet seen weighed the planet's strength, calculating when and how the next hunt would come. Harris stared at the horizon, at the hazy glow of cities rising from ashes, knowing every corner of this world had been watched and catalogued during its trials. We rebuilt, he said, voice steady despite the unease curling in his chest. We're alive. But out there, the universe has marked us. Legends now, not for peace, but for the hunt. Park's eyes narrowed, scanning the sky where the signals pulsed. Earth will always be a battleground. Every alien species capable of noticing us, every predator intelligent enough to track power. They'll remember, and some will come to test us. A sudden pulse of light flared across the void, faint, deliberate, a message broadcast in a language humanity could not yet decipher. Harris's breath caught. It's a warning, or a challenge. Park's hand tightened on his weapon, gaze fierce, or both, and we'll have to be ready always. Below them, the streets whispered with the cautious rebuilding of life, survivors moving like shadows among ruins. Humanity had survived the impossible. The apex queen, the predators, the collapse of civilization itself. But the scars remained, etched in concrete blood and memory. The planet was no longer neutral. It was a legend, and legends attract hunters. Harris looked toward the stars one last time, voice low and resolute. Balance is restored for now, but the hunt, it never ends. Park nodded, eyes fixed on the faint pulsing signals in the void. And Earth will always be ready as it can be. The wind swept across the fractured skyscrapers, carrying ash and the faint echo of battles past. Somewhere in deep space, new eyes observed, waiting, testing. The scars of a world remembered, the warriors of humanity hardened. And though silence fell over the planet, it was only temporary. The next hunt was inevitable. The universe had taken notice, and nothing would ever be the same. Earth spun on, scarred but alive, a legend in the void, waiting for the stars to come hunting.